Hello there, Alex. How are you doing?
Hey Andy, I'm all right, thank you. How are you doing? Are you still psyched about the football yesterday?
I am actually, yeah. Watched it with my son, which was lovely actually, because we managed to see quite a few of the matches, and it's of course the excitement grows with each game. So yeah, it was
Absolutely.
really good to see the match there. How about you?
Yeah, just with a few friends. It was a fantastic atmosphere. Isn't it funny thinking about your son? He only knows a world where England beat Germany.
Yeah, I can't believe it's at 55 years. That seems ridiculous. I find that hard
In
to
a major
believe.
tournament. I know it's crazy, isn't it? I think it's first time England kind of won, like without penalties in the
Yeah.
Euros. They've actually won in open play. What? So it's a bit of a historical moment, isn't it? And obviously very topical to our event today around global sport and the experience economy as part of the disruptive tech. And we're also part of the Festival of Research, aren't we? How's everything going with that so far?
We are, yeah, it's fantastic. It's the first day of the Festival of Research at the university. So we've got lots of events happening today, and we're starting off every morning with a YouTube live and an Instagram live where we meet the researchers. So we've got different researchers from different research centers and schools talking about what they do. And I have to say, it's not hosting these things. It's fantastic because you have conversations with researchers that otherwise you really wouldn't have. And that's what the festival's really all about. And I think you're right. It's great to have the Disruptive Technologies Cluster event happening this month where there's so much happening. We've got the Euros, we've got Wimbledon's just started, the Olympics around the corner. I mean, it's a great month for sport.
And Copa America as well. So and very topical as well because we're joined today for my friend and collaborator Gigi, who's the innovation at Grupo SBF and a founder at Block 4 and Ativa Esporte. And also my colleague Nicola McCullough, who runs our sport business programs at University of Salford Business School. So we've got between the Euros and Copa America, Wimbledon, and everything. It's an excellent time for this, and obviously our favourite topic as well, right, Andy?
It sure is. Let's bring them in and say hello to Guilherme and Nicola. Hi, both.
Hi there. Hello.
Good to see you both. So, Gigi, so you're joining us from Rio de Janeiro. Is that right?
Indeed, I am. Indeed,
wow.
I am.
Fantastic. I have fond memories of being there for the Olympic Games in 2016 and a few times before. So it's wonderful to have you here. And how are things over in Brazil at the moment?
Well, the good news is I will have my first punch this week. So I'm very excited about getting the vaccine. And as you've been saying, there's some confusions around that. Not completely dissimilar to other places of the world, but good. Most all in all, it's all good. I can't complain. Family is good, life is good. Although the weather today in Rio looks a lot like London.
What?
Cold and wet.
So, Gigi, you did your masters in sport administration at Sheffield University, didn't you? Which I guess is how we came to kind of know each other through people like Simon Chadwick, and you also came to Gary Crawford's esports conference as well, didn't you, at Media City some years ago when we were just first kind of starting to get excited about esports. So I think that's kind of the first time we met in person, I think.
Think so.
Yeah, cool.
Well,
so, yeah,
I have a quick memory as we acknowledged 5 minutes ago. But yeah, I think that was it.
Excellent stuff.
And Nicola, it's great to see you here as well. I think we've not seen each other for quite a while, so it's great to have you here as well. How are things going for you?
Thank you, Andy. Gigi, you would be super jealous of the weather in Manchester because the sun is shining here, which is very unlike the north of the UK, let's be honest. So, but yeah, I think, all is good. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, good to see you too. Thank you for inviting me along today. It's very much appreciated and nice to be with like-minded people in terms of talking about the experience economy as we move on now into a very different world from what the sporting fan experienced, 18 months ago as to what they're looking forward to now in the future. But no, thank you for the invitation. Great to be here with yourself and Alex and Gigi.
So Nicola and I also run a module called Sport in the Digital World. And so we're looking forward to running that one again in September. But I've just got finally got my copy of 21st Century Sports as well. So Andy and myself and Simon Chadwick did a chapter on extended reality and so forth. But I've just been reading through It's a really great read, actually. And there's a couple of chapters on blockchain in sport as well. I know, Gigi, that's something you've been heavily involved with at the moment as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Block4 is a company that I founded with a couple of partners. The last, they've been working on it for the last year or so, and we see a great opportunity to use technology to enhance fan experience and fan engagement. So I think that will be a great discussion. See how we can, use the power of technology to improve fan experience.
I mean, maybe just to kick things off a little bit, Nicola, I wonder, hasn't global sport always been an experience economy? Tell us a bit about how you see that, I guess, emerging language around this experience economy interfacing with sports.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, like you said, Andy, I think it's always been there. People have always been to a live event and you've always experienced something. And I think it appeared on my radar maybe 3 or 4 years ago now when I noticed there was a university in the US that were recruiting for professors in the experience economy. And I think that started then a bit of a domino effect in my mind, thinking, well, what does this mean and how does this transpire and what does this mean in an academic sense around what is an experience economy? And the thing with that term is it cuts across sport, it cuts across retail, it cuts across the event sector as a whole. Anything where we are having an interaction or an interface or as part of an activation, we are being immersed into an experience. And I think where that's evolved to now is it's not only about sports fans going to a stadium and experiencing a live sporting event. There's also this concept and this word that keeps appearing with the word experience, and that's convenience. And I don't know if you've been reading a lot of reports recently. Deloitte produced something a few months ago. And this concept of sports fans don't want to wait for anything now. They want things to be convenient. They want it at their fingertips. And that's not only, people in the stadiums that are there sat watching it, expecting things to still come through on technology and to still be observing and partaking in the event. It's also because, is it 80 or 85% of sports fans are not in stadiums for these events? They are watching things remotely, whether it's on social media or through different broadcast means. So it's a really interesting concept how this has evolved. And I think you're right, Andy, it's always been there. But I think the fact it's now been termed as something, and now there's a real kind of growing movement around, well, what does this mean? And how can we badge this and make this something that's quite unique? I think it is a unique concept, but I don't think it's something that's new. I think the newness is now in how it's evolving with technology and that interface and how that's moving on for sports fans.
It's an interesting point. I think there's often a kind of old wine, new bottles, isn't there? And we keep talking about esports as a new phenomenon, but really, it's, competitive gaming has got a long history, hasn't it? So obviously we can put these labels on things, and it helps us kind of understand them, and it recognises the growth in particular areas, doesn't it? But often, I suppose if you've been around long enough, you've seen these phenomena kind of develop over time, So we've got a question there from Russell, Andy.
Yeah, so do you think that the experience scape is being further advanced by Disneyfication of sports events? Well, there's a nicely loaded question, if ever there was one. I think that it's really interesting because my take on it is it's actually, I can understand why that question's asked, because if you look at, I work a lot with the Olympic movement. So obviously over the last 20 years, it has become much more of a theme park to go to the Olympic Games. So when you're in the Olympic Park, you've got all these sponsor pavilions that have a remarkable range of experiences for you. And I think there is a desire to kind of replicate that from one games to the next. A simple example would be, I think it was in Rio 2016 when Samsung's pavilion first had a big kind of virtual reality exhibition, which was powered, of course, by their Samsung Gear VR systems. And now you see that at every Olympic Games. Samsung always have a VR experience as part of that. And these are all unticketed things that you can just take part in by just being a spectator operating around the venues. I don't know what your recollections of that are in Rio, Gigi. How do you see this Disneyfication happening?
I think if you look at it in a positive tone, I do see it, and I appreciate it. I think you know, the ability to entertain and to make sure that people are having fun and they're having a great experience. We keep on coming back to the word experience, but I think it is important because it's all about what people take home at the end of the day, and not take home physically, but what they take home as a memory and as a you know, as a remembrance of what they're doing there. And if you do have a good experience, I'm going to be coming back to this word. I think that the whole talk here, we want to come back. You want people to you refer that experience to other people. You want to join your friends in there. So the Olympic Games, you know, what they're doing is in part increasing the opportunities for people and the time that people spend with the Olympic Games. The Olympic Park experience is precisely what you just mentioned. You don't just arrive there for the competition. You arrive there a couple hours earlier. You hang around. You see the venues. You have a Big Mac, or you know, or whatever beer is sponsoring it. In London, it was Heineken. Here in Brazil, was Skol. So you have a beer. So the whole thing is a family experience, is a friends experience. So I think it's brilliant because it's way more than just the competition. The competition is like the icing on the cake, if I can say that.
Interesting.
I think that's a really great point, Gigi. And I think, you know, again, what the focus is now for sports events organisers specifically is what you've just said. It was very much on the pitch and what was happening on that field of play. But now that momentum has completely shifted across to what is going on off the field of play, and where are interactions and engagement and those digital touch points happening for sports fans outside of a stadium after an event. You know, that lull time, kind of 2 weeks prior to an event happening, how can you build up the momentum and that excitement and passion with your fans before the event's actually happening? And how do they do that digitally now? So I think, you know, that premise of what you've just said is a really, really great example of the importance of what still goes on that field of play, but actually now fans want it off the field of play, and they want more of that because, again, our use of technology and our, I suppose, convenience of having so much technology around makes us it's a desire, isn't it, that we want to be fed more information about that sport or that event, you know, outside of the parameters of being actually there.
And the technology also helps not only on the build up, but the aftermath. You can help and you can extend the experience beyond the event itself. So I see, you know, the opportunities are, we already seen people, events organizers doing it, but the opportunities are going to be just increasing with artificial intelligence, you know, virtual reality, augmented reality, you name it, and blockchain. All of those technologies will help and will enhance the experience and make it like even more unforgettable, if I can say that.
Here's a question though, that we're talking about, you know, those different technologies and disruptive technologies. Is sport one of the most behind sectors compared to others in terms of adoption of these types of technologies? And I was kind of reading that a few times in this book in terms of being a bit somewhat behind the curve in terms of technology adoption. And if that's the case, then why is that, do you think?
Is that me or Gigi?
Both of you, actually. Nick, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has served sport a great opportunity to think and to reflect about what it wasn't doing and what it now needs to do. So I think if there's any positives coming from the sporting world, it's that they bought themselves some time to really start to refine what their offering is to sports fans, and to think more closely around how do we engage people, as we've just said, outside of those live events. So I think it's served a purpose that they've had this opportunity in a positive way to be able to use their time and to be able to make sure that they're aligned much more with their fans, making sure again that how they're leveraging the data from their fans as well. So again, thinking about what they're doing as a club or as a sporting organisation, and making sure that offering is much more personalised and bespoke. And I think, there has been a time of reflection and a time for, I suppose, development, during this this sort of difficult sort of 12 to 18 months. But hopefully, I think now they are starting to gain more momentum. In terms of other industries, I think that's probably a question for DG to answer, because I know that he's certainly the expert on that. But I think in terms of sport, we've certainly seen a shift, and it's a very positive one, around now much more, I suppose, focus and acknowledgement that technology has to be front and centre for, that engagement with sports fans moving forward.
It's really interesting that you mentioned personalization. We've got another comment from Russell in the chat about sort of intangible experiences and customer satisfaction. And I was thinking about, have you seen these platforms like Memo and Cameo, where you can request a celebrity to send you a personalized birthday message? It's almost like the end point of this personalization of media content. And it also makes me think about how it allows, I guess, hopefully, the performers, whether they're athletes or actors or musicians, to actually maintain some degree of control over their intellectual property, if you like. But I was thinking also of last year when Tokyo was cancelled, or postponed rather. We saw one of the major experience economy partners move into this territory, which is Airbnb. And one of the things they did was set up a number of experiences for fans to take part in by buying tickets on the platform. So you could, through Airbnb, train with an Olympian or experience part of Japanese culture in some way. And I think that, they're now a worldwide partner for the Olympic Games. So it's a huge shift in terms of the types of companies that now have something to offer for these global sports brands. Gigi, what do you think about that? Oh, I think you're muted there.
Sorry, guys, I had to mute myself because I had some background noise here, because one of my neighbors is going through a review here, so apologies. Just going back to Alex's question, just a little bit. I don't think sports was the least advanced, but definitely wasn't one of the most advanced. So I think it was basically set in the middle. For some technologies, I'd say sport being, very proactive in adopting and in going further. So if you think about social media, the sports sector is very good in adopting and mastering social media, and even in using it to its full potential, if I can say that. In terms of how other, I think they think about how can I say, other companies that gravitate around sport and use sport as a tool to leverage the adoption of new technologies and use them as a you basically use sport as a way to adopt and a way to speed up technology adoption. I think you spot on, Andy, and it's like sport is a, how can I say, is a great territory for experimentation, because you have so many very engaged fans that anything you try, you kind of like using a pilot territory for as its full strength, if I can say that.
You see, some of the, I mean, as you say, Gigi, I think there's a massive opportunities, and people get very excited about working with sports clubs because of that big reach and the passion of the fans and so forth. It's quite unique as a sector, isn't it? I mean, people don't usually get so excited about brands as they do about the favorite sports clubs and so forth. But I think perhaps there's something about the sports sector and that's kind of traditional and kind of a lot of strength is kind of pulled towards winning on the pitch, and therefore some things kind of the rest of the business gets a little bit behind. I think it was the PricewaterhouseCoopers annual sports survey. It said that I think that the majority of sports clubs believe that kind of new technologies were a massive opportunity, and yet only a really small percentage actually had any kind of innovation strategy. And it seems that there's a kind of some barriers around time, money, politics, etc., that kind of seem to stop sports clubs doing things. So even you're right that sports social media is fantastic, and sports clubs at all levels are on social media, but often the social media teams are quite tiny. They're probably for a kind of brand of the size, you would kind of expect a bit more resource in there to an extent. And I don't know what do you think about that, Nick? Is that fair to say, do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think some sports are obviously more ahead of the game than others. When you naturally look at obviously football, huge followings, and again their social media teams, in some of your top flight clubs are obviously much more extensive than you'd get in your lower leagues or even for your minority sports that are really trying to stamp their authority and to try and have a voice on social media and across different platforms, and it's hard to do because technology costs, people cost, resources cost. So how can minority sports kind of leverage some opportunities to be able to be on that platform? And Andy, being involved with the Olympics and all of your expertise and experience around that world, knowing the introduction of some of the minority sports now becoming mainstream Olympic sports. It's a wonderful opportunity and platform for those sports to now really, change momentum and change their shift and their tact around being more engaging across different digital platforms. So I think it's, sport itself more broadly, yes, it's getting there, but I think, the differentiation around different sports as well is always going to be there because of, funding and resources, unfortunately. But I think what will drive it, and I think what will continue this momentum, hopefully, is what we see with sport, and that's around individual behaviours. It's about connectivity. It's what a sports fan is. You want to feel connected. You want to feel part of that brand. You want to be immersed into the world of that brand on whatever level you can, whether it's being involved with buying digital merchandise or knowing what's going on with your favourite player or your favourite athlete. It's about being part of that immersive culture, but feeling a sense of connectivity. And I think that will always be there for sport. And, going back to, I think, your point at the beginning, Alex, around, why has sport maybe been a bit more behind the curve? And I think that sense of connectivity now, because it is a valid way of being able to do it, digitally, has now kind of, become a bit more, I suppose, dare I say, normal for a sports fan now. So it's accepted that it's okay to still feel connected outside of a sporting venue or, outside of centre court of Wimbledon. It's okay that you still feel part of something outside of a live event setting.
Definitely. I think it's probably a tough question to answer because, of course, there are multiple sports and on different levels and in different countries as well. So, for example, I was over in Rio with Gigi a few years ago, turn on the TV and the esports on the TV. Gigi kindly introduced us and we went around kind of interviewing some of the sports clubs in Rio as well. And they'd already kind of set up esports teams, and not just FIFA soccer, but League of Legends, for example, so they seem to be kind of way ahead of what we were doing in England in terms of, a couple of the Premier League clubs have dabbled with, a FIFA league and so forth. So is it the case as well that it might differ not just across the sport, but in different countries, different cities, etc.? I don't know what you think about that, Gigi. Are the Brazilian sports clubs more innovative than in other countries, would you say, in your experience, or about the same?
I'll have to say that it's different from from club to club, from team to team, from sport discipline to sport discipline. I would normally what we see is clubs with smaller fan bases or lower league or sport disciplines that don't have the impact and the followings as football has, they tend to be more innovative. And the reason for that, I believe, is one, they allow themselves to take more risk, and two, they are more open to how can I say, less conventional business models. So they will be, they'll be more open to someone coming in and having a revenue share kind of deal. They will be more open to a completely disruptive technology because it will give them some media real estate. It will provide them with, the acknowledgement and the stamp of being innovative, and that will give them some potential revenue leverage. So I think normally what we see, and I don't think it's that dissimilar, to Europe, to be honest. But you do see, in some areas, some institutions willing to take more risk.
Can I ask a quick question there for Gigi? Do you think, Gigi, that's down to the governance in sports clubs and sporting organisations, whereby maybe there's not as many barriers to the decision makers around them being able to, to have the freedom to be able to innovate, and be a little bit off the wall and not follow protocol and convention around what they want to do digitally? Do you think maybe that's why, smaller sporting organisations have that opportunity, because there's less of a, I suppose, a hierarchical approach internally?
I think there is something around that, but I also think there's the belief that because you're big, because you are one of the biggest football clubs in the world or whatever it is, there is a need to be a preconceived business model as well. There needs to be upfront investment. There needs to be certain guidelines and rules that less prominent sport disciplines and sport institutions are more willing to waive or to work around, if I can say that.
We've got a question in the stream from Maxwell, who's asking a bit about the current situation with the Euros and whether that's a way for clubs to make use of that connection before the season begins. And I guess one of the challenges with global sports is that we're all dealing with very different, quite local brands, actually. These events are often situated in territories. And so being able to piggyback off events to then support the development and continuity with your own event is a real challenge. I remember, I think it was also in 2016, Gigi, when Rio Games took place, the Olympic Committee launched the Olympic Channel, which is this online environment which was designed, I think, in part to bridge the gap between Olympic Games, because of course it's a 2-year gap for the Olympic Games, so it's quite a big gap for them to reach out to fans in between. But I wonder, do you think there are opportunities for brands to utilize the Euros as a way to sort of bolster promotion around and fan engagement in particular? Maybe Alex, you come in on this as well before the season starts.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Simon Chadwick and I talked a lot about kind of ambush marketing and so forth previously, or kind of piggybacking on, events. So, brands can have done a good job at kind of using events like the Euros or Copa America or the World Cup to sort of promote their, product, services, etc. when they're not even official sponsors as well. There's been some quite clever campaigns around ambush marketing, and probably most notably people like Paddy Power, getting footballers to wear Paddy Power underpants and things like that in order to, hijack their brand into a Euros game, for example. So yeah, there's always opportunities. I think everyone's kind of, certainly in England at the moment after yesterday's historic win, we're all excited about football again. Until until next time. But yeah, so I think definitely. Any savvy, marketers, brand managers, social media managers should be thinking about what's going on in the world and the mood of the teams in order to start, selling whatever it is they're selling, shirts or season tickets, etc. I mean, Gigi and I were talking about Ben Brereton recently. There's been an interesting case of a Blackburn Rovers player who, to all intents and purposes, we thought was English because he was born in Stoke-on-Trent and he plays for Rovers. Suddenly pops up playing in Copa America against Brazil for Chile. So apparently his mother is Chilean, and he's played England under 19s, etc. But now he's playing in Chile. So what a interesting phenomena of global sport. And then technology-wise, as we're saying, social media's absolutely exploded. So last time I checked, he was on about 800,000 followers, which is 8 times more than Blackburn Rovers or any other player or club has got in the Championship. So, and most of them are Chilean, so it's really interesting kind of global opportunities there. And Gigi, I don't know if you want to come in on that, because we were saying, weren't we, last time, there were perhaps opportunities that Blackburn Rovers should pick up on, and capitalise on that, wave of publicity in Chile.
Yeah, no, I was going to mention that precisely. I think you were spot on, and not only to bring in more fans, but to capitalize in financial terms as well. If the Rovers want to take a look at the Chilean market and work with the player to attract potential sponsors, potential merchandise, licensing. I think that there's definitely an opportunity. I think social media is one of the channels, but I would definitely look beyond that and think about how to capitalize and be able to attract revenue. Why not?
Actually, there was some talk of him going to Leeds as well, Nick. I don't know if you want to come in on this one, because obviously Bielsa is Chilean as well, isn't he? So the fact that the Premier League is massive in South America and Chile, actually...
Bielsa is from Argentina.
Oh, he's Argentinian, my mistake.
He used to be the Chilean, the national team manager for Chile, yeah.
Thanks for that clarification, Gigi. But I suppose there's a big uptake for the Premier League, isn't there, in South America? So I guess in terms of the tie-ups, that could also work, as much as I'd like him to stay at Rovers, obviously.
No, you are precisely. You are correct. I think Bielsa is more liked in Chile than he is in Argentina, to be honest. But he's Argentina. But yeah, I agree. If that happens and he moves to Leeds, then it's a kind of like a perfect storm for Leeds to explore the Chilean market. And let's not forget that Castillero del Diablo used. I'm not sure if they still sponsor, but they have had ties with Manchester United in the past.
Interesting.
Really interesting. I think one of the things that's I find fascinating is how brands start to find their way into immersive experiences that are novel, but perhaps aren't quite tested. I've got to show you something. I'm going to share my screen with you because I was just looking at this recently, and it's something that's been happening around the Wimbledon event that's happening this week and the next 2 weeks. And hopefully you can see that. This is the American Express virtual hill that's over at Wimbledon at the moment, and this has been advertised quite a bit, and of course it's trying to create or recreate the actual hill that you have around the stadium. And what's interesting for me is that obviously these are quite quirky things, and it's somewhat interactive, and I think they've got also a partnership with Andy Murray on a virtual reality experience that you can try out. And I think there's still that feeling that these more immersive technologies, these sorts of experiences, are perhaps not quite there in terms of the mainstream yet. Alex, I know we've done quite a bit in this field, haven't we? How do you see that? Because they're using things like augmented reality quite creatively, but a lot of it's still very niche, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, we talked a bit about kind of augmented reality and virtual reality recently, and it's developing, isn't it? I think certainly, when you get players like Apple and Google and Facebook behind it, chucking their weight at these things, it does tend to advance things a little bit. So we've seen some kind of leaps and bounds in, virtual reality headsets through things like Oculus Rift and so forth. And obviously once, Apple bring out their augmented reality glasses, that we need the hardware, don't we, that really works quite nicely and is affordable. We are getting there, but it's still kind of, it still feels a bit niche to me, like in the domain of gamers to an extent. I mean, we've seen some notable examples, haven't we? Like Pokemon Go, for example. millions of people downloaded that one and used it for a time. But it does still feel a little bit niche to me. But I think certainly lockdown, there were lots of headsets sold in lockdown, for example, and audiences, I think, get a bit more advanced and a bit more demanding and looking for this these experiences. And the technology does have the potential to deliver that experiences. I love that idea of a virtual Wimbledon Hill, So it's just thinking about that experience, isn't it, and how that translates into a pleasing, virtual experience, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Nicola, I wonder what have been your sort of highlights in terms of innovation and creativity over this sort of lockdown period? Because sports have done so many different things over this 15 or so months to try to keep connected with fans, create alternative experiences. Is there anything that sort of struck you as particularly creative or worthwhile?
To be honest, I just think, being a sports fan and being involved with, and I won't name the clubs that I support, but being involved with the clubs and seeing exactly what their output has been, just around simple engagement tools, player profiles, players doing Instagram Q&As and having exclusive access rights to these things, and just that whole concept of for me just doing more than the basics of reporting what the stats were from Saturday's game or whatever. I just think it's just so great to see. So I've just embraced on a basic level, if I'm honest, Andy, just any type of additional content that has been coming out from the clubs that I support. But looking more broadly around sports events, the example you've just shown there from Wimbledon is super. It used to be Henman Hill, didn't it?
Yeah,
at Wimbledon. And then it became Murray Mound.
That's right.
So it's quite interesting now that, like you said, Andy Murray has got a tie with American Express. Did you say it was? Around that type of kind of simulation, and I think going back to kind of Alex's point as well around it still feels really niche. Do you think that's for the next 6 months, or do you think that's for the next 6 years? Because I agree with you. There's a cost element to all of this, isn't there? In terms of accessibility as well, and people being able to have the purchase power to be able to do this. But surely that's what this process is. It's about kind of increasing consumer or changing consumer behaviour a little bit to try and have more purchase power around this type of product and these types of experiences. But Alex, I'm interested to know from your perspective, do you think this is for the next 6 months in terms of it being niche, or do you think that it's a longer term issue? Because I think
it's developing, isn't it? And as you said early on, Nick, I think the COVID-19 situation has not only given clubs and sports clubs and organisations time to think, but also, the cliche now, but there's been about 10 years worth of digital transformation being done in the last 18 months for all organisations, and certainly it's threatened the business models of sport events and clubs all over the place, hasn't it? So I think with things like the Quarantine Cup and esports, players, professional football players playing FIFA against other players and so forth, and millions of people tuning into Twitch for the very first time. People like my dad, who should have been, with his season ticket at Blackburn Rovers, now watching the games on his smartphone. So if you that's normal business to younger people, isn't it? But now I think audiences have been kind of exposed a bit more to these technologies. I say headset sales have gone up, etc. So I think there's we are getting there, and also I think we all know how massive esports is, and that will just continue to grow. And I think what is interesting, and I think I'll pose this one to Gigi initially, is that kind of blurring, isn't it, between the boundaries between what is physical sport and what is a digital sport. So, for example, Andy was showing me a video recently of some martial arts, virtual reality stuff where you're actually, you're getting the sense and the feel of the, not you getting battered, but you're getting more of a sensory experience. So no longer you're just kind of playing along with your thumbs, but you're actually, the technology is enabling new kind of sports, isn't it, as well? So Gigi, I don't know if you want to come in on this one. Like, where do you think we're going in terms of the boundaries blurring between these things? I remember in Rio a few years ago, I put Gary Crawford's quote on the screen saying, one day esports might challenge the hegemony of football, and I think I got laughed off the stage. But it seems to be becoming a bit more of a reality now, doesn't it? But what do you think? Do you think technology will kind of blur these boundaries in the future? Might we have robotic players, or virtual reality might become the norm rather than actually physically going to the stadium?
That's a really good question, and to be honest, my straightforward answer is I don't know. I think definitely the line is going to be blurred, and among the what we've seen, during the pandemic, I think the most interesting one for me, at least, was Formula One. That you saw actual Formula One drivers racing against fans on simulators. It can't get any more real than that, apart from being in an actual Formula One car in a Formula One circuit. So, and in terms of all sports, I think, car racing is the one that has kind of like used simulators and become more friendly to that kind of experience. To the point that I think, technology adoption is going to. I think it's with, I think almost, all new technologies. There's that curve of adoption, and then it stabilizes and it becomes more welcoming to regular people on the streets. I think it will become more affordable. It will become less niche, and this will increase the investment that everyone puts in it. And I think that's the same can be said, about blockchain and NFTs and all of those things. Today it's still very, 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 very niche. We know about it, we hear about it because we are deep into the industry. But if you talk to your neighbors, your next door neighbors, they probably haven't heard of it, but still the opportunity that these new technologies bring to the table, we don't know what they can do yet. That's the thing. I think if you ask me, for example, about virtual reality, I'm pretty sure it will be. What we see today isn't even close to what will be in 1 year. And the same can be said, for example, about blockchain. What can blockchain do to sports? Can we have digital contracts being signed by players with clubs? Can we have people invest in players' careers, tokenize their future revenue? What can we do? We don't know. We know a lot can be done. We have some hints of things that can be done, but I must say I'm really excited about it because compared to what it was 15, 10, and 20 years ago, the speed of change is just absurd. So in like 1 year, if we think about what we're talking today was not talked about 2 years ago in the space of sport, it's unheard. I think we mentioned about 5 things here today that we would not relate to sport 2 years ago. It might have been sped up by the pandemic, but I'm pretty sure it won't be slowed down.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think one of the things Alex mentioned, the virtual taekwondo sparring that was released by the World Taekwondo. It used to be World Taekwondo Federation, but they had to change the name to World Taekwondo for acronym reasons. And this I guess a real showcase video that shows full motion capture, then translated into a virtual space that allows the player or the fighter, depending on how you characterize them, competing within this virtual stage. And the thing that always we talk a lot about esports at Salford University. I think one of the reasons that it's so exciting is because people who have come from the traditional sports scene understand very clearly that when you produce sports events, you have televisual content related to that activity. But then once that actual physical world experience is over, what else do you have? And of course, with computer game content, the modeling of the computer game graphics and imagery is something that sticks around forever. So it's far more efficient to produce events that are based within computer games environments because they don't require that physical capability and infrastructure, at least in terms of the field of play. And I think that's what's really focusing the minds of the Olympic movement, who are seeing, of course, so many of their sports now start to turn towards these other types of experience. So I think that they're disruptive because people can see that to produce an event is just, it's infinitely easier when you've got computer generated imagery. It's a huge.
It's really a fascinating point, that, and just talking about the experience, the technologies have got the ability to be able to put the fan into that experience, isn't it? So you're no longer watching it and feeling the emotions of excitement or sadness or joy. You couldn't get much more than that if you're actually immersed into that experience and actually you're part of the sport, if you will. But and also allowing fans to be part of something that they couldn't probably do otherwise. Like some people physically couldn't be in a boxing match against a professional boxer, for example, but within the creating the kind of safety limitations, but still retaining some of that excitement of the interactivity, if you will. So ultimately, is that where we're going in terms of the technology allowing fans to become part of that experience rather than just simply passively watching it, I guess?
I think that's a really sorry, Andy, I was just going to say, I think that's a really good point, Alex. And I think what we've just seen there around that taekwondo example is also about well-being as well, and it has health implications, that there can be this continuum of people being engaged, but also on an emotional level as well, that connection can be there for sports fans. So, like you said, if you can't get to the live event, well, what is the alternative? And to have something that is so close to that actual, participant in that sport and actually being that participant, I think it's immense. And quite rightly, hopefully, it's kind of more sports are now looking at that as a means of not only just fan engagement, but enhancing that connectivity that they have with fans even more, so that loyalty to brand or to the sport, is continually growing and gets much more sustainable, I suppose. Yeah.
Maxwell asks a great question here about Wenger has a vision that one day robots will be standing on the touchline as managers. So former Arsenal managers, possibility of having AI football managers. Arsenal have experimented with an AI version of Robert Pires on Facebook Messenger as well, which is quite cool. But I think actually this robotics idea is potentially a reality. I think the Robo Cup, for example, aimed to have a full team of robots that could beat a human team by about 2050. So there's great advantages of it, AI and robotics, I think, within sport. I think there's a fine balance, though, isn't there, in terms of retaining that kind of, what's great about sport, the emotion and so forth. Like, the example Gigi was talking about Formula One, if you can't see the human driver and feel the emotion and so forth, then will people connect with it? But obviously there is great potential there with AI and robotics, I think, within sport. This kind of global appetite for 24/7 sport, players get tired, don't they? They get injured and so forth. Robots don't, So there's obviously a business model for this, but we just got to take care, aren't we, that we've always got to maintain that sort of competitiveness, and the excitement of sport. And Andy, you wrote a bit about that in your book, Sport 2.0 as well, didn't you?
Yeah, and it just reminds me of sort of going back to those sort of early conversations we have about, in fact, it comes up obviously in the context of Euros, who is the best person or people to make decisions about who should be on the playing field and what takes place. And it's the perennial question in sports, whether the coach has the best perspective or whether the fans do. And I think that the robot on the sideline is probably an AI system that is potentially powered by the collective knowledge of all the fans, but and therefore don't even need to have a physical presence. But it may sort of put paid to the whole, and I guess, problem that fans have about feeling that their managers or the coaches are making bad choices. So maybe if they are responsible for that action, then it might change the dynamic considerably. But I guess watch that space, and we're actually also out of time, Alex. So we, as our space has expired essentially already, but we've covered so much ground.
We really have. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I think with this one more than anyone, we could just go on all day about it, couldn't we? But thanks so much to Nicola and Gigi. It was a really, really interesting discussion, and I look forward to talking to you guys again soon about this topic of which we love so much.
I know. Thank you, Andy. Cheers,
Thanks so
Alex.
much,
Yeah,
everyone.
pleasure to be here.
Thank you, guys.
See you
Thanks,
guys soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alex.